but it's all to do with the power structure being shifted to the female, not for the female's use. We, because of our egos, tend to grab hold of things which claim to give us power, but in reality it's for someone else's purpose, which works very, very well. The woman today, as I say, the black woman, the young female, has grown up generally with a mother who runs her life, has had different men through the house, and when she's a teenager, she looks for someone with power. She goes for the gang leader, and it's the gang leader, the one who seems to have the answers, who's not afraid of people or the system or anyone else, that she will respond to. The black male himself has had his culture shaped for him, including the music and the fashions and all the rest of it. That was given to him by the top, pushed through much music and Hollywood, and he adapts it at the bottom. It becomes a target of criticism by society. This is intentional. This is absolutely intentional. But the same technique hasn't just been used on the black culture, because every country that was under the Soviet rule has gone the same way, where the women were promoted to the top, divide and conquer. Pretty well the whole country, the Soviet system, was run by authorized NGOs. The leaders were generally always women, and the men had the lower jobs. And now that the Soviets have pulled out, you have men who have no confidence whatsoever. Millions of them drink themselves into the grave. The women are all leaving those countries. They're trained, they're educated, and they're looking for work elsewhere, or marriage to men in other countries. But they're neglecting the men in their own country. This was an all-pervasive, scientific, connected system to make you the way you are, which certainly is not to make you happy. Those who get offended by the truth, remember, I'm talking in generalities. There's always the odd exception, here and there, of all ages, different genders, and it's generally the exception who understands this, who gets a hard time in society because they know, they are aware, and they're living amongst those who are unaware. I'll pick up some more on the same topic tomorrow night. Tune in then to the site, cuttingthroughthematrix.com, and may your God, your gods, your tree, your favorite flower, your favorite pet, or your budgerigar go with you. Hello, this is Alan Watt, and cuttingthroughthematrix.com. This is November the 2nd, 2006, and this is another part of the same series I've been doing on the intervention and superimposition of scientific, socialistic, psychological techniques which are used upon the peoples of the world, of male and female, and the different age groups, all the way up from childhood into old age, and how we're manipulated heavily, and how our beliefs are understood. Watches the mother almost salivating over very successful men that she works with, or the men around her. So the daughter then looks for someone who is powerful, in charge, in control, and very often it's one of the criminal mindset. This is well understood. The political correctness of today does not change human nature. Nature can be sublimated, but it cannot be destroyed simply through indoctrinations. It shifts around in the subconscious and will show itself in other ways. What is interesting too is that as the father, the role model of the father, has come down, again primarily through media and through entertainment, which we emulate. Monkey see, monkey do. That's what has always been known since before the days of Plato. Women still need the powerful male. That's why they can get lost in fantasy and carried away through movies and drama, and that's why Harlequin romance books, which are really a form of written porn, today's variety anyway, are the most widely read books and recirculated books in second-hand stores, next to the Bible for consumption. There's a tremendous need there, because you cannot get rid of drives. You can sublimate them according to cultural custom, even when the cultural custom is being altered and updated. So as the father comes down in the scale of things with power, girls at school often fall headlong over the teacher figure who has authority and who is given authority over them. And they have these crushes. This headlong dive into almost anonymity, quiet, silent anonymity of the male has been helped through inoculations, which has definitely affected the hormonal output of the male. This is studied every year. The sperm count is disclosed every year by the United Nations. The reason for the United Nations being so interested in this phenomena is because they have a Department of Population Control. And we've all been tampered with, male and female, with their hormones and through inoculations. And the xenoestrogens as well, added to the water and so on through plastic pipes, plastic bottles, which were made popular for that reason. We've been heavily, scientifically tampered with. And this was done because the male natural response is to protect the tribe and protect the family. In the changes which are coming up, you must destroy that bond. You must destroy any power the male has in society and replace it with TV, fake ones, hyper politicians who always seem to know what they want, even if it's mass slaughter. It's a symbol of a man with power. Between ages, and the mysteries always have a categories of ages where they use the zodiacal dominance of a particular member of the zodiac to predominate for the 2,500 years. And Aquarius is their utopia, not the utopia for the people, although all the New Agers have been taught that it is. Somehow they'll all become one, and they will be the brain chip. They'll all be one all right, but they won't be individuals anymore. This is the other side of totalitarianism and tyranny. People can submit like slaves rather than face the world with the added burden of being an individual in a changing world. In the mysteries, which match up perfectly with fascism and communism, you'll find that the sun and the moon are other emblems of the same two things. But you also find that the scythe of Saturn, Chronos in the Greek,
It's called the side wielder, that cuts the link or the chain between two ages. And during this transitory period, he is called the master of misrule, or the lord of misrule. It's when the old culture seems to be falling apart, and it does because it's made to fall apart. As role reversal, cultural reversal, things which were taught as true for thousands of years are suddenly reversed or exposed, and it's a period of chaos, of misrule. It's a time when people who are in the know, in the understanding, can rise to the top if they're in the right families and taught the mysteries. And for most people, it's chaos. They have nothing to hold on to. It's like ships without anchors. They're just tossed around in the waves. Hence, the massive indoctrination through magazines and television with specialists supposedly in psychology to tell you what to think, what to do, how to behave. In reality, you're being used. It's motivational behavior modification that you're submitting yourself to, and it's not for your own good, it's for those who rule you. Along with all the New Age bookshelves, you'll see all the motivational techniques in the same books of what you can be. You're being altered, your thoughts are being altered, your motivations are being guided by someone else. And you'll find that you're all going along a path already laid out for you, promising you one end, but you don't see the end of it, and you won't even when you hit it. This is masterful control. It was many, many centuries in the making, and you can see the beginnings of this sudden outburst of the sciences in the 1500s in the court of Queen Elizabeth I of England, where it was the first openly Rosicrucian court in history. Everyone around Queen Elizabeth I, all the famous players you find mentioned in her era, were all members of the same Rosicrucian lodge in London. The outburst of the sciences is what is so interesting with John Dee and Francis Bacon and many others, because they knew they had 500 years to use sciences, make the public work, and create an industrial era, and then all of the things that would come from that industrial era, such as bigger and greater wars to dominate the whole planet and create an empire, a world empire. And always fooling the people who fought those wars, always fooling them with a different reason, a different outcome, such as the First World War, the war, they said through, and it was H.G. Wells, the propagandist for the British government, who coined the term the war to end all wars. What a joke that was. It's the last vestige of a tribal system. In a well-bonded family, they can be very formidable and will stand up for each other against all odds. In this system, the new world order, where it's not just family planning on a small scale, it's global planning on a similar type of agenda scale that's going to be implemented. You can have no families as we have known them. And that's why every family around is basically today dysfunctional. Dysfunctional because it's been made that way as the culture creators and manipulators have altered it. The biggest and most frequently spoken about problem in therapy and counseling for couples today is when the man says that he's not allowed between themselves. In fact, the high priesthoods, which really ran Babylon, were more interested in men themselves being men, as it's always been the same, in fact, in all high priesthoods in every culture. Women are disliked and sometimes hated by them as almost irrelevant, but it's more than just that. It's to do with, again, this sadomasochistic streak which they have themselves, going up through an order of deviancy, which they then promote on general culture at the right time. The reason they hate women is because, and every study has shown this up to date and reproved it, and all sociologists know this. Women are the easier ones to manipulate into trying or going along with something new. The culture creationists love this because they can then introduce fads, modes of thinking, which will alter the culture. Women who have their own needs, you're born with needs. When the needs are understood, they can be so easily manipulated. When you look just at the women of the early 1900s, the great-grandmothers and grandmothers of the girls who suddenly were given the miniskirt in the 60s, and compare the two, they're both women. And yet one would never have dared to put on something which just barely covered the body. It isn't that the grandmother or great-grandmother would never have done that. It's just that through her culture and her period, she was indoctrinated not to do that, whereas the granddaughter was not only encouraged, it was made the social norm, and not to stand out, to be accepted by the peer group, another facet of understanding which the big boys have. A natural trait could be exploited because young people are run by hormones and attraction, and they want to be looked at and admired and so on. This is reality. So the male and the female is set at war with each other on purpose, a war which was covered and subdued during the period where marriage was encouraged, in the Middle Ages and onwards, to work for the system. Now the reversal, like Plato said, you can reverse the culture, and those who go through the changes are the last ones to notice. That should be quite amazing to a thinking person, but it's true. In the 1960s, the sciences of all entertainments were heightened and let loose upon the peoples of the world, the young people. Children and toddlers will hear the catchy parts of songs, which they used to call choruses at one time. And you always get an intro into songs. Songs last about 2.5 minutes. You might wonder why. It's because of economic reasons, because they're meant to sell. And so they have the intro, then they have the catchy part, which people hum like ads on television. And children will do it automatically. And yet whatever you say automatically is already registered within your subconscious. It's working on you in ways which you don't understand. And there is an unconscious. This is something alluded to by Carl Jung. It's the sea of all knowing. It's the primeval chaos. All knowledge within the mind, the brain. Something that Plato again and others touched on, and Pythagoras. When you understand something, it's because the knowledge is really already within you. You have to formulate it in the proper sequence. But the understanding means that you know far more on the subject than you thought you did. In the sea of the unconscious, it's the depth of all bits of information, all writhing about. There's no cultural control over the unconscious as such. But in the subconscious, the part way where the censorship kicks in and out, you can actually pass things on into the unconscious. And the unconscious can be motivated because it doesn't have the inhibitions of the culture. That's why in your dreams, you could do the weirdest, wildest things which you'd never do in real life. And you wake up with the manifest content. Sure, you remember this strange dream that you had, and within a minute or two you have latent content which is scrambled. Your subconscious has kicked in to censor it because it doesn't want you to see what you're possibly capable of. These techniques are exact sciences. And in the 60s, as I say, one song came out amongst many. A very, very catchy tune, deliberately so, to get teenagers right down to toddlers chanting. And those who ever went to dances or the later discos will remember even when the favorite songs would come on and they'd sort of murmur and hum along to the verses, but they'd all jump into the choruses, and yet they never thought about the words of the choruses. And this particular song was supposedly written in a way of a father talking to his son. Listen to the words and listen to the voices to see how you are manipulated in ways you don't understand. It was later on in the 60s where the culture creation industry passed down to the employees below, the actors and actresses, directors, producers, songwriters, etc., to try and write things about gender-neutral subjects, songs unknown to the public because the public don't know these things, they don't analyze. You think culture is there and it's part of you. You think it is your culture, but it's not as a stranger. An exact scientific stranger. And the music industry were told if they wanted hits, don't say he or she in the song. And they all went into action. Thank goodness, I think Charles Aznavour from France at least wrote a song called She. But the French are that way. They don't go along with so much political correctness that the rest of the world goes along with. So changes are always going on around you, which end up within you, and you're unaware of them. Very, very powerful influences, scientifically created with exactness. And We are the puppets and the hidden puppeteers pull the strings. And we think when we are communicating and interacting with each other that we are real individuals doing so. Nothing is further from the truth. These are accepted norms. Even when they're changing, they're updated like programs in a computer, and the people are updated with precision. Their topics of conversation are given to them. Their way of responding to topics are given to them. And those who get upset when you tell people the truth, it's generally because you're touching on something which they are guilty of themselves. And their ego won't allow them to see it as the truth. There is nothing on television that's real. There is nothing that is spontaneous on television. Everything down, and I've talked to many producers in the past, everything down into even a third-rate play for your main television station like CBC in Canada, every part of the set, including the type of flower in a little glass vase, and the color and the positioning is discussed by panels of people, everything, for its psychological impact. There isn't a phrase which comes out spontaneously out of the person's head. The newscasters read dummy boards, but they look at you with authority. And in a world where we find we're floating helplessly, individually, we crave that authority, and that is again the sadomasochistic tendency. Those who are pushed down in society crave the power of those who do the pushing. The abused person can become the abuser so easily. The divisions of people are almost perfect now. It's the rare individual that has maturity that can overcome the conditioning. It's the rare couple who can go through a lifetime together with respect for each other, unaffected and certainly not acting out all of the ways they're supposed to behave according to television, which of course would bring on the chaos. It's the rare individual who understands that in this day and age. Most people are simply full of their conditioned responses and reflexes. They're unanchored in a rough sea. And that's all intentional. That's why the booming industry in psychology, psychiatry, therapy, groups of all kinds, cults, and yet they're all being led in the same path, because you're going to find the same teachings today throughout therapy as you will in the New Age, because everything comes from the same capstone in culture creation. Cause the problems, guide them into the solutions. These are ancient sciences at work. The rule books, as I say, are in all the holy books. They are the holy books for those who understand them. And if we take passages in the Old Testament, you'll see older echoes of the New. In Revelations, the revealing of the system, they say that man would be turned against woman, woman against her husband, children against their parents. And we tend to think, how could that be? How could any power cause that to happen? And the answer is easily. because they understood the sciences thousands of years ago just as well as they do today. The mainstream characters they let loose on the public, like Freud and others, were giving you kindergarten reality, which still astounded many people at the time. But they only give you enough to alter the culture towards the agenda. They don't give you all of the sciences which they have. You never share power if you want to control others. When we look at the tremendous amount, never mind the propaganda given to the homosexual movement and lesbian movement, and as I say, there's nothing in society and social movements that isn't approved and created from the top down at the right time. If it didn't suit the purpose, it wouldn't happen. There'd be no funding, and even if there was a demonstration, you would never hear about it on the news. But women have been emulating dominant mothers, and since survival instincts will look for a partner with dominance, many of the women look towards other females. Many of the males see the mother as dominant and the father as absent today, gone, divorced, kicked out, whatever, and the mother is dominant, so they emulate the mother. These were all known responses to the induced situations. As I say, those who created marriage for a purpose and marriage for life have reversed all the structures that kept it in place for the new age. And I'm simply the messenger on this topic. When the elite had their arranged marriages, it was for progeny only. They'd appear on the balcony, the king and queen, the fairy tale, and the people would emulate what they saw. Aren't they a loving couple? But in reality, they didn't have to even like each other. Their houses and castles were so big, they could live in either ends and never see each other except for the balcony appearances if need be. And the male was free to do what he wanted to do, and so was the woman. And they did. And in the 20th century, really, that's when they gave us romantic love and encouraged it big time to keep it going, to keep the marriage system going for World War I and II, and then start to dismantle it after the United Nations was officially in power. The acceptance to follow fantasy. It's the will of the wisp. Such stuff are dreams made of. Yet everyone's encouraged to chase after the dreams. Who gives us the dreams? Very few people understand that they are simply the dreamers. But who gives them the dreams? For what purpose? And the media, the same media that gives you the dreams, loves to point out how dysfunctional society has become. Just look at it, it's in chaos, as they give you more and more porn for entertainment. And porn now isn't even porn, it's deviant. It's going to be more and more deviant, you see. Like any addiction, you have to get more and more of it and wilder stuff to get the high. This is intentional. And then out come the governments with all of its agencies, always, they breed faster than anyone I know. Governments are always having an offspring of new departments to deal with the new parts of the chaos. Always. And this again is what Carl Jung envisaged in his last book. It wasn't just an iron curtain across the world of communism versus fascism. It was a a slowly expanding curtain, iron curtain across the whole planet of dictatorial bureaucracies until there was no freedom left for the individual. And he was well aware that you can dissect society into the individual and those that we would say are the mass. The war that's on today is not so much a war on the masses. The masses are downloaded with everything and they question it not. The war is on the individual, the occasional thinker, because it's the occasional thinker who can communicate, who can affect many other people, who then understand and they go running with information. That's why I don't pretend to be a patriot cheerleader for some old world order. I don't give you the Hollywood slogans or the John Wayne cliches which you've been taught to stand to attention with. I don't wave flags because flags symbolize the hyper-Masonic system under which we live. They gave us the order of the bee, the border, bee order. It served their purpose up until now, because borders are just imaginary lines drawn across maps, which enabled members of an elite who lived with their offsprings in all countries to wage war upon their neighbours, never participating themselves, but benefiting from the changes that war brings for more control and taxations. And it keeps the people in fear of those guys over there. So they need you, you see. Another technique of the bully, the sadist. And they teach the people to be masochists who also would like to really, really adapt to the system and possibly get up the ladder and become one of the sadists themselves with the power. So sadism and masochism go together in this particular scientifically created system. Many years ago I heard a top psychiatrist in England discuss the traits of the psychopath. Fascinating study. And as an example of the psychopath, he mentioned the character of James Bond, someone who could obey his paymaster. That's how he gave his allegiance, was his paycheck and the status he derived from his position. A status too that he could do amazing things in society and get away with it, tremendous destruction, because he was authorized to do so as long as he got the job done. He could have as many women as he wanted in bed, one after another. He could see some of them being killed in the movies. He could kill himself, he could kill other people, and then that night sleep with another one or two females. It was someone with no conscience. That's what a psychopath is. And psychopaths can be found through special tests. And we know the special forces in every country uses these tests to select them for the really bad boy groups that they have, the dirty squads. They go out and assassinate people and kill whoever they're told to kill. And they can go home at night and they don't need sleeping pills or they don't need to get drunk to sleep because they have no conscience. These people have always been used by the controllers as they give one one culture to the people to be ruled, they also select the deviants from that culture to enforce the rules when need be. This talk is encompassing so much. I don't write down anything in advance. I just talk as to what comes to the top of my head. And if it seems a bit haphazard, it's because I don't put it out in a particular format. And I've been chopping wood all day as I prepare for the white stuff to fall from the skies, which already did actually. I'd like to take this opportunity to mention to those who will maybe get this passed on a tape or a disc to them, to look into the website at cuttingthroughthematrix.com and see what there is for sale there, because I certainly could use the money to pay for the site and for the help I've got from one person to keep it going. Well, we can keep it going. As I say, I'm not one of the authorized ones who are put there with the cliches you've been conditioned to respond to. I say what I know, and if I can continue for a longer period of time, I could certainly teach you much, much more to do with the system. I could give you the higher meanings in the occultic movements, not the ones that are put out there just for the Christians to grab and be scared of. Because these are all sciences, you see. So it's up to you, the listener, to support me as I come out with this information. In the winter, when I'm snowed in, I hope to give you an awful lot more. I should also say that you can also tell various talk show hosts that you'd like to have me on as a guest. I don't call them myself. I never have called them and said, put me on. It's the listeners who've done this. And if you like what you're hearing, or even if you dislike what you're hearing, phone up your radio talk show hosts and have them put me on. That way I can reach more people. I don't create a movement as such, all following what I say. I ask you to analyze everything I say and check it out for yourself. I'm not pushing some covert religion, as you might be surprised others are doing. And that's another story. I'm just telling you of the various things I know to do with the system, to do with why you feel so alienated, those who think, and those who aren't even certain of why they feel that way. I'm explaining it to you. And this series of talks is to do with how everything is controlled, gender, the generations, the so-called races, the colors. And you should think about that in itself, because it is no coincidence it's called the human race. A race is something you start and try to win. What do they mean by that? We know that those at the top put lists out through or by their main economists in the 1700s onwards to do with those who would be useful in a future upcoming society based on economics and efficiency, and those who would be eliminated. Nothing happens in this system by chance. There are no sudden transmutations, spontaneous, of diseases. Diseases and the transmutation of a virus or a bacterium is a fine and old science by now. We live, as I say, in a world of disinformation. We have been trained to listen to no one except the experts. And this is something that I should maybe touch on now. Because we have a craving, a tribal craving for the leader. Albert Pike and others in the high Masonic movement wrote about the creation of leaders in the revolution, like Danton and others were executed. The same thing happened with the Soviet system when Lenin got in. We're taught that the Soviet system went sour when Stalin took over. But Lenin, the lion, which is what the name comes from, used the terror techniques to perfection. Trotsky wrote about it. He was all for it, in fact. And Lenin told groups to go out into the peasant areas where they had these communal farms, and just to round up dozens here, dozens there, hang them from trees, leave them there to rot, and it would terrify the peasantry into obeying, and it would terrify those very small farmers into giving everything up. Because to these great leaders, whether it's a Hitler or a Lenin, a Napoleon, or any other countless names of famous players, the masses are the masses. The science of control is the same science. And the little people don't count. Again, George Orwell put that very well in his book 1984. The proles don't count, they're animals, he said. We suspend our incredulity when we hear famous people saying things which are horrible. We actually make excuses. I hear what he says, he said it, but I guess he didn't really mean it. That's how they get away with it. Never in the history we have been given, ancient to modern, have all of the people understood what was happening to them. The whys, the wherefores, the hows. History has always been altered, redirected by the elite themselves, but sometimes deflected and slightly delayed by the few who understand. But they also understand, and let no one fool you, they've always understood that the bulk of the populace are never truly conscious. They are hypnotic subjects. Their beliefs are truly induced beliefs. The reality is induced and marketed to them, and it's reinforced through the schooling system, through drama and fiction, and through the role models we're given, fictionalized though they may be. The bulk of the populace have never, ever been capable of consciously working out the fine details of their indoctrinations, manipulations, and the psychodynamics of their own social structure. They don't know. And so this isn't just a matter of waking up more people. You cannot wake someone up who isn't ready to do so, or you can't wake someone up who isn't able to do so. And in many and maybe most of the populations of today's world, we have been so chemically attacked, and biological warfare has been used through inoculations to attack specific parts of the brain. Like Arthur Koestler said in his book, The Ghost in the Machine, and he worked with UN departments to find ways to do this efficiently, and he thought it was just swell. Many people cannot wake up. They don't have the ability